You've built the evidence base. You've mapped the labour market and skills gaps. You've modelled your productivity deficit. You've found the funding. You've aligned every partner in the room. And then you sit in a committee meeting for your municipality or local authority, and you have to explain from first principles why economic development matters at all. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And the fix isn't just do better work. The problem runs deeper than that. I'm Glenn Athy. I've spent over 30 years working in local and regional economic development. And I wrote the Local and Regional Economic Development Handbook. And I wrote this book because I kept seeing the same gap. I saw some brilliant technical work which was undermined by a weak or rushed case for why it matters. The opening chapter of the Local and Regional Economic Development Handbook deals with the rationale for economic development, not as a theoretical preamble to the book, but as one of the most practical skills an economic developer can have. How to make the case, get the decisions your way, help your communities. Today I want to walk through this process. Local and regional economic development exists as an activity, as a policy, as a professional discipline for one simple reason. Places are not equal, and they're not equally affected by economic opportunity and change. The UK shows this more starkly than almost anywhere in the developed world. The gap between London and the southeast, and much of the Midlands North, coastal towns, and post-industrial regions of Wales and Scotland isn't new, and in many places the gap in economic performance is getting worse. Productivity, earnings, employment skills, business density, access to capital, and even life expectancy, they all vary enormously in the UK, sometimes between neighbourhoods a few miles apart. And this isn't a market blip that corrects itself. It's the product of deep structural differences in terms of industrial history, institutional capacity, connectivity to opportunity, which means that what works in a growing knowledge economy city is not what will work in a coastal town with an ageing population and poor transport links. Context is not a caveat in local and regional economic development. Context is the work. Here's where policy often goes wrong. The temptation to reach for an off-the-shelf solution, to copy what worked somewhere else, to apply a national policy or programme template without proper local adaptation. The Local and Regional Economic Development Handbook is blunt about this. It says that every local economy is different, and good practice starts with genuinely understanding the economic geography, history, institutions and politics of the place you're working in. We call it economic intelligence. Call it knowing your patch. Either way, it's not a nice to have. It's the foundation that everything else sits on. Before you design an intervention or an initiative, ask, what's actually happening here and why? What's the evidence on this economy's strengths and weaknesses? What's been tried before and what happened when it was? This is harder than it sounds. It takes good data. It takes a willingness to challenge comfortable assumptions and the honesty to admit when the picture is messier than the political narrative wants it to be. Economic development rarely happens through calm and considered strategic planning. It's usually caused by a trigger, a shock, a threat, or an opportunity that suddenly can't be ignored. For example, a major employer announces closure and redundancies. A derelict regeneration site becomes politically unsustainable. A new funding window opens, perhaps there's been a flood or a pandemic or a change in political leadership, or perhaps there is a once in a generation infrastructure investment being delivered in your locality. So why does this matter for practitioners? There's two reasons. The first reason is that your evidence-based and strategic frameworks should already be in place before the trigger arrives, so your response is rapid and grounded, not improvised. Second, triggers aren't always bad news. An inward investment prospect or an anchor institution's ambition can be just as much a catalyst and bring new partners to the table. And crucially, a factory closure isn't just a jobs crisis, it's often the visible tip of a deeper shift in a sector or a supply chain. Responding well means understanding both the immediate cause and impacts and the underlying causes and system change. Here's a truth that no strategy document insulates you from. The case for economic development has to be made to politicians again and again, usually against the clock and in competition with other priorities that might feel more immediate. Economic development is not like roads or social care or care for the elderly, where the cost of underinvestment is easy to make visible and urgent. Economic development is a medium to long-term endeavour. Skills pipelines, business ecosystems, investment attractiveness, these take years to show results. And councillors facing 4-year cycles of election don't always have that luxury of time. The Local and Regional Economic Development Handbook treats making the political case not as a distraction from the real work, but as part of the real work. Translating economic evidence into political language, connecting productivity statistics to a constituent's lived experience, is a genuine professional skill. One that's chronically undervalued in technical training and HR development. We've all seen the pattern. The strategy's written, the vision is articulated, an outcomes framework is built, and then funding cycles change. National policy changes. A key champion individual moves on, and the programme quietly loses momentum. Now, an honest moment. The evidence on whether economic development programmes actually work is genuinely mixed. Critics of public intervention aren't always wrong to push back. Some place-based programmes have delivered real, sustained gains in employment, investment, productivity and income. Others have absorbed serious public money for very little to show. The difference usually comes down to a handful of factors. Number one is the quality of the underlying evidence and the quality of understanding of the causality of the problem or challenge or the nature of the opportunity. Another one is the coherence of the design of the project or initiative. How well designed is it? Does it take account of good practice? Does it take lessons from past practice and build them in to the new programme or initiative? Another factor is the strength of partnership working, because economic development is a community endeavour. It can't be done by one actor alone. Another factor is the continuity of commitment, i.e. you need long-term solutions for long-term economic problems or challenges. Lastly, the quality of leadership and governance is vital, particularly to maintain this long-term approach. So this isn't a counsel for despair, it's a call for rigour. Evidence that's used honestly, communicated clearly, and kept live throughout a programme is one of the most powerful tools a practitioner has. A strong partnership working at its best is what lets economic development punch above its weight, leveraging private investment, aligning public services and public funding, and sustaining activity beyond any single funding stream or short-term initiative. Another thing to emphasize is learning, evaluation, review. You can only get better at something if you're honest about assessing how it's progressed. You can only design a program on what you know at the time, but as you implement the program, get to know the beneficiaries or businesses better, you will become better informed, and naturally you will learn things you can apply to improve delivery. So this chapter in the handbook about the rationale and making the case, it's actually one of the most important chapters. If you have this habit about understanding the context, about evidence, the political aspects of economic development, and the structural roots of spatial economic inequalities, this helps shape everything that follows. If you want more insights, you could visit lredhandbook.com. That's lredhandbook.com. This has an AI assistant which will help you understand the contents of the book, as well as access to some free sample chapters. And when you read the book, don't think about places and local and regional economic development as a general area of competence. Think about your place. Think about your history of your community, its economic and business strengths, its politics. That's what this work in economic development is actually about.